I'm Sam,
And this is Gabe.
and this is Coaster Wars.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we have another Coaster Wars battle for you, and this is going to be a good one. This is going to be tough for me. I can tell already. As we're filming this episode, I have yet to pick a winner. So I will not be picking a winner until the end of this episode, which will be interesting. But we got the Boomer taking on the Zoomer. That's really the best way to describe these two roller coasters. Just because of the design aspects, the years they were constructed, and then by the companies that they were constructed by. One no longer exists, and the other one is kind of growing and budding into a major player in the roller coaster community.
Oh yeah, and how we were talking before we started recording, and I'm just like, this is gonna be a good episode. They're two very amazing coasters, and I feel like we're just gonna have a lot of fun kind of duking out between these two. But without further ado, do you want to get to introducing these two?
Absolutely, I don't think we should wait any longer. In the red corner, standing at a massive height of 205 feet and reaching a top speed of 72 miles per hour, hailing from the shores of Sandusky, Ohio, and the aerodynamics gym, it is Magnum XL-200. In the blue corner, standing at a compact height of 109 feet and reaching a top speed of 53 miles per hour, hailing from the far fields of Ohio and the GCI gym, it is Mystic Timbers. Let the fight begin. So my coaster that I'll be bringing, the Boomer, in this episode is Magnum XL-200.
And the one I'm bringing, the Zoomer, is Mystic Timbers.
Let's talk about Magnum right away. Let's dive right into it. We'll let age before beauty. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
So Magnum XL-200 is an aerodynamics roller coaster built in 1989. So right at the beginning of the 90s, basically. This is the roller coaster that started it all. And what I mean by that is, there's a term called the Coaster Wars. It's the name of our podcast is based on it. And this is when amusement parks wanted to compete for the biggest, baddest, best roller coasters. They were all trying to break the height record, the speed record, whatever record was out there, they were trying to break. And Magnum XL 200 was the roller coaster that started that trend. It was the first full circuit roller coaster to break 200 feet. However, the drop is not over 200 feet, so you can argue whether it's a hypercoaster or not. I still think it is.
I think it is.
But it's a personal favorite of mine. I love this roller coaster. I could talk for hours on this roller coaster, just on the historical aspect, but also it's a great ride experience. I really truly believe that. I think it's one of the better rides at Cedar Point. There's like a cult following for Magnum XL. And I am part of that cult full-heartedly. I love this roller coaster, and that's why it makes my list at number 7.
Speaking to the history of this ride and how it began the Coaster Wars and led to some of the most amazing innovation in coasters in that time, I think we have to talk about also the company that built it. Because this coaster was built by Aerodynamics. Now, Aerodynamics was founded way back in 1946. And what I didn't realize, and went in and did research, is like Aero was an innovator for their time. They were the first to include steel tubular tracks that are now used widely on tons of steel coasters, but they were the first with the modern inversion, but then they were the first to do 3 inversions, the first to do 4 inversions, and the first to do 5 inversions, but they were also, as we see with Magnum XL, the first to do a full circuit hyper, and they're also the ones that designed our modern log flumes nowadays. And now I have to mention that because I know they're not coasters, and I know this is a coaster podcast, but I love myself a good log flume. So.
Yeah, well, you got to think about it this way. Without Aerodynamics, the company, we don't have the roller coasters that you see today. Any of them. They don't exist without Aero, because Aero was the main manufacturer back when Walt Disney was building his first Disney World or Disneyland out in California. Without Arrow, that amusement park wouldn't exist, and the rest of them wouldn't exist because that was the first. They were the first to do it, and I think that's a something that you really have to look at with this roller coaster because without Magnum, you don't have the rest of the hypers out there. You don't have the Gigas that you see now today. So, like, without Magnum, you don't have Millennium Force. You don't have Intimidator 305. You don't have Fury 325. I mean, any coaster that you could name that's over 200 feet doesn't exist without Magnum's success. And I think that's something we really have to consider here when we're looking at these two roller coasters. And even if Magnum might not be the better ride experience, there's a lot of importance to it. And there's a lot of stuff that without this roller coaster, we don't have the modern roller coasters that we have in today's day and age.
Oh, yeah. And then to talk about Arrow just a tiny bit more, but this leads into Magnum XL, is what kind of gives Arrow rides a lot of their character and stuff was also how Arrow built them. So they designed them before computers were even a thing. So all of their rides are hand designed with no computers, and that leads to like no things like there isn't a lot of heartlining in their rides. And Gabe knows a lot more about this than I do. He could probably say more on it. But something he always mentions too is that they use concentric circles, which makes some of their like airtime hills like really. Gabe calls them triangles, and makes them really poppy. But it also gives a lot of character to the rides because nowadays steel coasters are so smooth and so perfect.
Yeah, there's a lot of roller coasters that you get on. And you go through the ride experience and you get off and you don't really remember it or, you know, I mean, it was a fun, you go, oh, that was a fun roller coaster and you move on to the next one. Arrow has a personality, or not Arrow, Magnum has a personality. Like, this is a living, breathing roller coaster. And I know that's obviously not true. I probably sound crazy right now, but it feels like it's alive. It feels like it's got a personality. It feels like it can talk to you. And if you go into this roller coaster and you appreciate it, it just feels like it gives you a better ride experience because it knows that you appreciate what this roller coaster is doing to you. And that's why I love this ride so much, because it does feel like it's a person. Like Magnum XL-200, I feel like I can walk up and talk to this roller coaster. Again, I probably sound crazy, but and that's what I really, really love about Magnum. But let's dive right into this layout before we run out of time here. So you have the 205-foot tall lift hill, which goes up over the water park, and it gives you an awesome view of Lake Erie looking out over the water. But with that, you drop down, and it's like a little bit, especially if you're in the front row, it takes a little bit to gain some speed. But after that, you go into a very strong pullout, which pops up into a massive airtime hill. It's so massive to the point where you don't really get a ton of airtime until you're actually exiting it and going down. After that, you drop down into another pullout, which is covered by a tunnel, which makes it nice and dark and makes it feel like you're moving faster. And then you pop up into another airtime hill, which gives you a lot more floater airtime. It's one of the best moments on the roller coaster. And that's when you enter the pretzel turnaround, which is basically a 360-degree helix, followed by another 360-degree helix. It gives you some really nice G-forces as well as laterals. The cool thing about Arrows is that you get that jankiness as you're in the turns because of what we were talking about earlier. And it makes it really give you a good dose of laterals back and forth as well as the G-forces as you're ping-ponging through the turns. After that, you pop up into an airtime hill covered by a tunnel, which is alright. It's not the best moment. And then you have a second airtime hill before turning back to the right to head towards the station. And then we reach that moment, the best part of this roller coaster, and that is the triangle airtime bunny hills. And it is just bunny hill after bunny hill after bunny hill. You got ejector moment after ejector moment. After the first three, the next ones are covered by tunnels, so it makes it feel like you're moving even faster. But yeah, just ejector moment after ejector moment. I think there's like 6 or 7 of them total before hitting the final brakes and getting prepared to turn into the station. But with that, we have to talk about the Magic Seat. Let's bring that up right now.
Yes.
So the Magic Seat on Magnum is the first car, so the very front car, but the back row of the first car. In other words, it is the third row on the roller coaster train. And it is the craziest experience. Like, you don't experience Magnum until you ride in that row.
It's really, it amazes me every time that certain roller coasters have such a specific seat. Like, some of them we just say either front row or back row, but Magnum's seat is just such a specific one. It's so funny to me. But Gabe is completely right. It's one of those things. I've said this before about when you get the coaster in the right spot, you will go through and you'll ride the coaster, maybe even a couple times, and you're like, oh, cool, yeah. But then you hit that magic seat and you get off and you're like, what even was that? I haven't ridden this coaster before. And that is what you get with Magnum's Magic Seat. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's just such a crazier ride.
Yeah, a lot of people like to complain about how painful this roller coaster is, and let's be honest, it is not a comfortable experience by any means.
Oh,
Like, don't go in expecting a B&M Hyper, because that's not what you're gonna get in this ride experience. But the reason it is so painful is because when you're gonna ride in the Magic Seat, the airtime is so violent and so rapidly applied that you slam into the restraint. And like I said, it's like 6 or 7 times at the end of the roller coaster where you're just slammed repeatedly into the restraint. But for me, the ejector airtime part of it is just so much worth the little bit of pain in the thighs. And and like I said, you wouldn't get that pain if you weren't experiencing the massive ejector moments that are on this roller coaster. So I always tell people, you love the pain, love the feeling of that little bit of a sting, because that means you're getting a really good ride experience.
well, and as we've said with this coaster before, it just adds to the character of the ride. It makes it feel like it has its own little personality, and it's like it it makes it such an enjoyable experience. It's really fun when a coaster has its own personality and it's not just, oh, that was a fun coaster. It gives you a really unique experience and it makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Arrow guy. I have obviously Loch Ness Monster made my list as well, which is another coaster that people might not consider to be the best. But this roller coaster truly has a really good ride experience, in my opinion, and I'm not just ranking it here for the historical factor of it. I'm ranking it because A, it's historical, but B, it's also really, really fun. This is a roller coaster you could probably, if you can, have a high enough pain tolerance, you could ride this 3 or 4 times, and every time you just get off with a big old grin on your face. That's what I want in a roller coaster. I don't necessarily need the best ride experience, but I want something that's fun. I want to actually say that this is fun. And you could say that about Magnum XL. It is just fun. You're laughing the whole time, you're smiling the whole time. And that's really what this roller coaster is all about.
Oh, yeah. But with that, I think we have to kind of change gears here and get into
Do we have to?
Yeah, you don't like this ride. Don't even try to pretend.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I do like this roller coaster. You're right. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So be quiet for a second, okay? We're going into Mystic Timbers, which is a GCI or a Great Coaster International roller coaster that was built in 2017, and it's at Kings Island in Ohio. And I want to start off by talking about mine and Gabe's experience with this ride. I feel like we were not expecting what we got with this roller coaster. Was this like one of our first rides of the day?
So this was our second ride at Kings Island. We were gonna try and ride Diamondback, but it wasn't open yet. We got there really early, and they let us into the park early. And then they were doing pre-rides for season pass holders, and then for some reason they just opened up Mystic Timbers for everyone. Is kind of what happened. But what just looking back on that trip, this is when we and you were budding roller coaster enthusiasts. So we weren't doing as much research. We weren't looking into these roller coasters as much as what I do now, obviously. And And Mystic Timbers was not on our radar at all. I mean, we were going
Oh
to
no.
Kings Island for really two roller coasters, and that was Diamondback, Orion, and the Beast. And so Mystic Timbers, it's kind of like what we had with Flight of Fear. It wasn't on our radar. It wasn't a roller coaster we were concerned with riding. It was just another credit to gain. And we were just blown away by the overall ride experience, and we were just blown away by. This was our first GCI as well, I believe.
Yeah.
And they're just they're not your grandpappy's wooden roller coaster. Let's just say that. Especially if we're calling this one the Zoomer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was one that really surprised us, but in a really good way.
Oh yeah, and then as I've been saying now, as I get into researching these coasters, I also end up researching these companies. And now, so GCI, I was like, I haven't heard that name. I feel like I haven't heard about a lot of their roller coasters. Well, and so then my first thought was, well, maybe they're just something like RMC. Maybe they were established in like, I don't know, 2010 and they just haven't built that much. This company was established in like 1994. They built their first coaster in 1999. But so I'm like, okay, what's up with this? And then in doing more research, a lot of their coasters have been RMC'd actually. Wildcat.
Yep. Wildcat's Revenge, one of your newest coaster credits, was originally Wildcat, a GCI.
Yeah. Gwazi at Busch Gardens was a GCI that became Iron Gwazi. And I felt like there was another one on the list. I didn't write all of them down. The two that stuck in my head were Wildcat, which became Wildcat's Revenge, and then Gwazi, which became Iron Gwazi, because they're two very good RMC. They have more coasters on their list, but they're also an international company. So a lot of their other coasters are just off in other countries. They're just not here in the US. But so they really just kind of blindsided us with this roller coaster. And I do remember us getting off, and you ended up buying a t-shirt for this ride by the end of the day because we were just so impressed with it.
I did buy a T-shirt. For those of you who are listening, we talked about this a little bit, but this roller coaster is actually a lot higher on my top 15. We'll be talking about it again in the future, just because it is on my top 15. It's a lot higher. I
Yeah.
think it's like number 5. I guess it's not that much higher, but you get what I'm saying. I absolutely love Mystic Timbers. This is one of my favorite ride experiences, and me and you both love wooden roller coasters. That's something that we both agree on, because they do have more character, usually, because they're a little bit rougher. But yeah, I love Mystic Timbers. I love this ride experience. One thing I love in a roller coaster is pacing. I think that can be tested in our last episode with Goliath. I love pacing. Well, even Batman the Ride as well. But I love pacing. I love roller coasters that don't let up. I love roller coasters that just hit you and hit you and hit you. And, you don't have time to think. You don't have time to process. It's just element after element after element after element. And that's what Mystic Timbers really is. It is just airtime, 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 airtime. Oh, here's a turn, tunnel, helix, airtime, 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 airtime. Oh, you're at the end of the ride. And that's what this roller coaster is. It's airtime. I mean, that's what most wooden roller coasters are, but it is just relentless. It just does not let up at all.
Oh yeah. To speak to that, it's really kind of hard to talk about the layout on these rides, but what Mystic Timber does is in 3,265 feet of track, it sends you through 16 separate air times. And then if you were listening to Gabe, it's still got turns and helixes mixed in there. It is just that was like one of the first facts that popped up when I started doing research on this ride, and I'm like, 16? That is a ridiculous number. And then, so to kind of describe what it does do to you is it brings you up to 109.2, I gotta be specific, feet lift hill. And this should also be a testament to how good this ride is, because this has a curved drop. It's not the traditional big, long...
Curve drops. Oh, yeah. I talked about this with Raging Bull. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to my first drops.
Yes. So this one does have a curved drop, but that curved drop, it it makes you gather your speed instantly. You hit that 53 miles per hour at the bottom, and you're just ripped through that first pullout. And then, like Gabe said, it just drags you through the rest of this ride. You have literally no time to stop and think about what's just happened to you. And then you're walking off the ride, and you're like, what the hell just happened? And I think how much Gabe is a purist, and this ride having a curved drop speaks to how good of a ride it really is, because he throws that out the window and is like, no, this is an amazing ride.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest way to explain this roller coaster is you have a 109-foot first drop, which you're thinking in your head, oh, that's not that big of a drop. But the rest of the roller coaster is only like 10 or 15 feet above ground level for the rest of the ride experience. So, except for, I think, the first pullout, I think, pops up maybe to 50 or 60 feet. But what that does is it allows the roller coaster to carry its speed and can carry its momentum from the smaller first drop through the entire ride layout. And there's not a moment on this roller coaster where you feel like it loses a ton of speed. And because of that, that's where it gets its really good pacing. Every element is compact enough that it doesn't lose speed, but it's also exaggerated enough that you still get a force out of each element. And that's what I really like. I think the other big thing that I like about this roller coaster is it's not just a straight up airtime hill for each element. There's a little bit of a twist to the left, or there's a little bit of a banking to the right, or whatever. And it's kind of like a kangaroo jumping up, back and forth. And so not only are you going up and down, but you're still going left to right within each element. And that's what I really love about it, because not only are you getting doses of floater airtime and maybe even a little bit of ejector, you're getting laterals with those forces all at the same time. And that's really what sets this roller coaster apart, is you're getting multiple forces at the same moment. And that's what I really love about Mystic Timbers.
Oh, yeah. Now, as much as this is an amazing, absolutely great ride experience, what I also love, because I'm the theming queen, is how themed this ride is. Because holy bejesus.
This roller coaster is one of the most themed roller coasters in the Cedar Fair chain, which is saying something. Yeah, it is very well themed. I'm sure you're going to talk about that some more.
I will try to make this as concise as possible, but the first thing I got to talk about is the story that surrounds this ride. So it was built around the fictional logging company, the Miami River Lumber, who bought up the land and decided they were going to begin clearing the wood out of the area. And to even bring in other rides, because the actual track of the roller coaster Mystic Timbers interacts with the railroad track for the railroad ride at Kings Island. And I forget what it's called, but there's another ride over there that it interacts with.
It's the Rapids ride. Yeah. It's the Rapids water ride.
So, but the whole thing is that this imaginary company, their plan was to use the Miami Valley Railroad, which is the train ride, to haul out all their wood, until a set of mysterious circumstances led to the shutting down of the area, the bankruptcy of the company, and the whole entire area being rampantly overtaken by natural overgrowth. And so that's just the story. So when you get into the actual theming of this ride, what happens is at the beginning of the queue line, there's a big sign for the Mystic Valley Timber Company, or Lumber Company. And then as you're getting in, there is an old GMC truck that's crashed into one of the signs that's got logs in the back. There's music playing on the radio, but then there's also a broadcast playing on the radio of a guy who's talking about how you should get out of the area. As you get further into the queue, there's then TVs that are playing what looks like security footage, and it looks like security officers going in and trying to clear out an area, and then at one point there's one security guard that goes screaming in the other direction. And then by the time that you get up to the actual queue, you're in what looks like the station is designed like a lumberjack shed or something, and there's all kinds of lumberjack memorabilia all over the place. But the theming doesn't even end there, because then you get into the lift hill. And what this lift hill does is it's actually accelerated. It goes a little bit slow as it takes the train out of the station, but then it speeds up as you're going up the hill, and then you hear audio from these speakers that is like a security guard that's like, hey, this is a restricted area, you need to get out of here, leave, you need to leave the area. And then right as you're approaching the top, now you're going faster than a normal wooden coaster, and then all of a sudden slows way down, and you just hear on the speakers, whatever you do, don't go in the shed, and then you're pulled over really fast on this lift hill and you're sent into the roller coaster. And then to talk about the very last bit of theming on this ride is the shed. Now, if anybody's ridden a roller coaster...
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a weighted subject right there.
So I personally really love it, and I love what they were trying to do. So if anyone's ever ridden a coaster ever, you know that a lot of the times you're the train waiting to go into the station to unload, you're kind of like in an area where the other trains would normally be stored, and you're kind of just sitting there, and you really don't have anything to do. So what they decided to do was basically do an after roller coaster show, where they like themed out the whole storage area to look like an old dilapidated shed. There's an old Coca-Cola machine in there. There's an old radio. There's a whole bunch of props and designs. And then you come to what looks like the end of the shed with a projection screen, which does a little show for you and shows one of 3 different endings. And then you take a 90-degree turn back into the station. And I get what Gabe's getting at. The little projection is just a little cheesy, and you're like, "Oh, that was cute."
What happened is when they debuted this roller coaster in 2017, they advertised the absolute living shit out of this roller coaster.
Oh yeah,
and that was the thing they were bragging about. What's in the shed? What's in the shed? Oh my God, you gotta go ride this roller coaster to find out what's in the shed. And it worked because a ton of people rode the roller coaster. But a lot of people were disappointed because they were expecting a drop track or, they were expecting another element, not just a projection screen with some special effects. So it disappointed a lot of enthusiasts and a lot of general public people because they were expecting a lot more from the shed. But if you go in it knowing what it is or, not blowing your expectations over what the actual element is, it's still really creative. It's still really cool. It's a moment that I appreciate because, like you said, there's nothing to do when you're sitting on the brake run, and this gives you a little bit of a, you're kind of looking around trying to figure out what's going to happen. And for that, I appreciate it. I really do. And it does add to the theming quite a bit on the roller coaster. But yeah, it was just one of those things where they over-advertised it. They over-promised is what Kings Island did. So when they actually debuted the roller coaster, a lot of roller coaster riders were disappointed because of that.
Oh yeah. And then just as like a little side note, obviously if you're in the front row, you get a better view of the screen, so that just makes it a little bit better. So if you're in the back cars, it's not quite as good because you can't see the screen as good. And then the only other thing that I have to say about this is just a little thing I appreciate, which is literally just personal preference. But there's a radio at one point that music kicks out of, and it always plays an 80s song, and me and Gabe are big 80s like classic rock fans, so we just like that. I like it, at least.
I like it because it actually comes out of the radio itself, yes. Which is cool. It's not speakers around you and then the radio like lights up and then the speakers turn on. No, like the music actually comes out of the radio, which is cool. They did a really good job theming it and making it feel like you're in a lumberyard or whatever. And all that stuff. But this roller coaster's ride experience, the actual stuff that comes before the final breaks, is absolutely peak tier. With that, I think we got to talk about who we're picking for a winner. I'm going to go first because I said I haven't picked one yet. After talking about these 2 roller coasters, I've been going back and forth for a long, long time. I love Magnum. I really, really do. But at the end of the day, Mystic Timbers is in my top 5. Magnum is not. The actual physical ride experience on Mystic Timbers is in a league above what Magnum provides. I love the history. I love the bunny hills. But I did mention it's slightly painful to ride Magnum, and Mystic Timbers is not. Um, and they both are really similar ride experiences in their back to back to back to back airtime. And I just prefer a wooden roller coaster over Magnum, even though Magnum feels like a wooden coaster. Um, it's tough. It really, really is tough. But I'm going to take Mystic Timbers in this one.
And unfortunately, this one was an easy one for me. I'm taking Mystic Timbers. I just love everything about this ride. And you know what? As much as I love all the theming and I really do love that shed and stuff, I think the best, and of course the ride experience is without question a league of its own. What really sold it for me was the little bit of theming they put into how a ride actually operates. How they accelerated that lift hill and then they slow it down for just a second so that audio can play and then it sends you over the edge into this ride, which I think is actually really, really creative and something that I really love about this ride. And then, of course, just everything else about it. It is so much fun, and I love it to no ends. And unfortunately, Magnum XL, you know what? I do really like the ride, but it just didn't make my list, so.
I think the biggest thing when you're talking about these two roller coasters, and we mentioned it with the title name Boomer versus Zoomer. I just wanted to say that one more time. It comes down to Mystic Timbers is just more innovative. It's more modern. It's smoother. It's more enjoyable. And it's just the fact that these roller coasters were built 30 years apart, and Mystic Timbers just becomes the better ride experience because it's newer. I mean, that's just what it comes down to, honestly.
Yeah.
Magnum XL-200 made my top 15, though. Let's just talk about that for a second. Like, Magnum XL-200 is a personal favorite of mine. I love that roller coaster. I could talk about that thing for hours. It's an absolutely great ride experience. I love it. Every time I go to Cedar Point, I get multiple rides on it because I love it that much. And like I said, it just comes down to Mystic Timbers is newer. It has a newer design and newer construction, and I think that's what really puts it over the top in this battle.
Well, and something we have to think about with my list too is, like Gabe said, when we went to this park and when we did this trip, me and Gabe were very much literally budding, like sprouts coming out of the ground roller coaster enthusiasts. So what I'm running into with like researching some of these rides, or even like I got a re-ride in Goliath and I'm like, it's a really great ride, but I really have to rearrange my top 15. So my problem is that I'm like, I need to get back to Cedar Point and Kings Island and re-ride some of these rides and get multiple rides on them and ride them in different seats and really analyze the ride experience that I'm getting out of it because my opinion of coasters has changed.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. But with that, we're going to run out of time here pretty quick. Our next episode is going to be probably one of the most controversial episodes we will ever have on this podcast, mainly because you're bringing a roller coaster to the table that I absolutely hate. I hate your ride. I really do. Let's just be straight up honest here. I'm very jaded when it comes to this roller coaster, but for good reason. And I'm going to talk about that in the next episode on why I think it's not a good roller coaster. But it is going to be the battle of the RMCs. So you're bringing an RMC to the table. I'm bringing an RMC to the table. Two very one very good ride experience, one ride experience that you like for some reason. I don't know why, but
This is how messed up my top 15 is. I think I would really have to get another ride on, but I also am not totally sure.
You just ruined it!
Oh oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
You'll
just have to put a bleep over it. Put a bleep over it like you're swearing.
Oh my god, I'm gonna do that. Okay. But
because that is a swear word in my opinion. I just really don't like the coaster.
But so I need to I think after we're done with recording our current top 15s, not only do I have another park that I have to fit in there, but I also have to really reevaluate where I have coasters in this list. And after that, I don't know if my ride will stay in my top 15. Let's just say that. And who knows? Maybe even Gabe totally bashing it will change my mind. So
what do you want to call it? opposites or whatever. I hate it, so you're gonna like it just because I hate it. But
That's a sibling thing, though.
yeah, yeah, no. Well, speaking about that for a little bit though, that you have a whole another amusement park. Your new number one. We're talking about bringing in on the episode after we finish our top 15s, just so you can talk about that roller coaster for a little bit. But it'll also give me a chance to talk about another RMC that's near and dear to my heart, but that did not make my top 15 list. So that'll be a cool episode to look forward to way down the line. Another cool thing that we'll be doing is something happened on our list. Our top four, are both of our number four roller coasters, were the same. So we're gonna have a special coming up. That episode is going to be an hour-long episode, and we're going to be talking about the roller coaster that me and you both enjoy. But we're also going to be talking about the rest of the roller coasters in that amusement park. That's going to be a really cool episode to look forward to as well.
Oh, absolutely. So join us next week for the Battle of the RMCs, and join us for future episodes, especially that one that Gabe is talking about, where we're going to be covering an entire park instead of our normal Coaster Wars.
Yep. But with that, I think we're done.
Yeah.